in a museum in Colmar in Alsace hangs now what is known as the Eisenheim altarpiece, painted by Grunewald, sculpted by somebody else, I can't remember who. And this was painted for a sanatorium, for a hospital run by Antonites, people who followed St. Anthony, and they cared for people specifically with a particular terrible disease. This painting includes one of the crucifixion. And Christ hanging on the cross is not just in the throes of agony at his crucifixion, but is also marked with the signs of plague, with the signs of the disease that the people, the patients, with whom they could identify. It might be appropriate then to think of the solidarity Christ has through the suffering he comes to bear with suffering humanity on a day when we begin yet another phase in our fight against the current pestilence that afflicts us. And yet, is it so appropriate when what we celebrate today is precisely the exaltation of the cross, the triumph of the cross, the opportunity to revisit the cross outside of the timing and the busyness of Holy Week, of the penance and the fasting of Good Friday? It's really looking at how, I think, one way to look at it is how the cross, the scandal of the cross, that was ignored in Christian iconography because it was so terrible for several hundred years, becomes the symbol of our salvation, becomes acknowledged, becomes represented, becomes something that is mandatory in our churches. The move then from the infamous gibbet, as St. Alphonsus calls it, to the triumph of the cross. And this, perhaps we can see, is precisely in this story from the book of Numbers. The object of terror, the thing that causes the problem, that causes the death and the pestilence, the serpents, becomes the very thing that saves. Often when we read the Bible and we read passages from the lectionary, we focus in, and that does yield a lot of insight, but it's always important also to take the context. And the context of both the reading from Numbers and from John speak of something bigger, of this triumph, of this exaltation. In the book of Numbers, there's a story, of course, of wandering. The name of the book in the Hebrew Bible is In the Wilderness. It's a story of wandering, and particularly Numbers 19 to 21, within which this tiny little story appears, is a story of them being refused passage through Moab and particularly through Edom, of being pushed ever further away from the promised land that they wish to enter. It even recounts the death of Aaron, prefiguring Moses' own situation at the end of the Pentateuch. Aaron will not enter the promised land. He remains the wrong side of the Jordan, one might say. And his vestments are given to his son Eleazar. So this incident of the serpents and the bronze serpent comes while the people are frustrated from not reaching the promised land. They have yet to cross the Jordan. The context in which Jesus refers to this is in his conversation with Nicodemus, which is all about being born from above, being reborn, born anew, about coming down from heaven so that you might go up to heaven, as Jesus introduces his allusion to this story from the book of Numbers. So it's again about looking to another homeland, looking to heaven, the kingdom of heaven, for which we must be born anew. Implication being we are still outside of it. The word that is used for the pole, often translated as to put the serpent on, that Moses puts the serpent on, is a standard. In Hebrew and Greek, it both means a standard or a banner. It shows the way. It's made our way into one of the hymns we sing in Passion Tide. Forward our royal banners go. It's a standard, it's a flag, it's a banner that shows the way into the promised land. And I suppose, therefore, that is why it is appropriate that we have the symbol of our salvation, no longer the scandal that it was, but precisely the banner that shows the way, that shows Christ. There's many poems at the back of the breviary which are edifying and holy, that are introduced for reading, private prayer, or even to introduce some of the prayers that we say. One of them speaks of the cross, and it's just attributed to From the Irish. O King of the Friday, whose limbs were stretched on the cross, O Lord, who did suffer the bruises, the wounds, the loss, we stretch ourselves beneath the shield of thy might. Some fruit from the tree of thy passion fall on us this night.